All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely chomping at the bit to make this video right now because none other than world's strongest man, Mitchell Hooper, decided to talk about Olympic weightlifting, more specifically, the greatest weightlifter of all time in Lasha Talakhadze, and how he thinks that Lasha would not be a good strongman competitor.
People moving the most weight are not always the people who are the strongest in the world. Look.
And I'm just going to sum it all up for you right now. I disagree.
That is not how that works.
I think Lasha would be a great strongman competitor.
No.
And he would have potential to be one of the better ones.
No, not in the least.
But it is important to understand that this is all hypothetical. This is all an argument that I'm going to try and make over the course of this video. Now, what I'm going to do is explain to you guys how incredible Lasha Talakhadze truly is. And then we're going to look at Mitchell's video, and I'm going to point out these very specific things that I disagree with. Let's go. All right, guys, quickly, my sponsor today is none other than Barbell Apparell. You can see I'm wearing my custom Barbell Apparell shirt. And then also the hat, yes, it has sweat stains in it because I trained in it today. I work out really hard in this stuff, and I think you guys might like it too. Go to barbellapparell.com/Telander, and you can get this shirt, other custom ZT shirts, and on that page is listed my favorite stuff to wear, whether it's training or just out casually. Now let's get into the video. Okay, first and foremost, let's talk about Olympic weightlifting compared to strongman. We are comparing apples to oranges, but they're both fruit, and they both taste really good. They're kind of similar in certain respects, but yes, it will never really be proven that one can transfer over to the other unless it has been done before. I'm giving you a little clue as to what I'm about to talk about. But first, Lasha Talakhadze is so incredibly good. If we think about Olympic weightlifting, it's been around for a century. And yes, it has been in the Olympics the entire time, which is actually very important to understand its legitimacy over strongman, bodybuilding, and all of these other things. And I know a lot of people are going to hear, oh, it's more legit, you're being very snobby. But I'm actually really trying to point out that a multitude of countries have created systems in which they select children, and then those children train for decades to become the best on earth and compete against other systems that do the same thing. Okay? And they have been doing that, as far as we know, for over a half a century. For 60 years, they've been selecting children and whittling them down to get the best ever. Think about that. There's really no other strength sport that's even close to doing something like that. That's what the Olympics allows, weightlifting to do over the others. Now, Lasha Talakhadze is the greatest of any of those lifters of all time. I don't know how many people that is. I don't know, how much money, how much funding has gone into with all of these countries to develop these athletes. But Lasha, in my opinion, and I can make a totally other video as to why I think this dude is the greatest of all time. He really is. He really is just that. I'll give you the top reason right here. The way in which he has won and the way in which he has hit training lifts are so much greater than anything we've ever seen before. The weights that he casually hit were some of the greatest weights of all time. And then, of course, he also has the biggest total to have ever been lifted in competition. I think he also, yes, he definitely has the greatest total to have ever been lifted in training. Okay? This is not just the best current, weightlifter. This is the greatest weightlifter in a sport that has existed for, I think, over a century now. This is a big, big deal. Okay, great. So now we understand how great of a weightlifter Lasha is, but that doesn't really, add to the argument that he could be a good strongman, which is why I'm actually going to use Mitchell Hooper's video to explain this further.
I'm going to explain why someone like Lasha or Ali Reza wouldn't do that well in strongman because they're not that strong. Of course, this is relatively speaking, but they are not as strong as the strongest people in the world. And I'm going to convince you in a few quick videos. First of all, we're going to look at Lasha deadlifting 300 kilos. This is incredible. And the way he does it is amazing. He can do this very, very easily. The challenge is any strongman, even who can go to OSG, which is the qualifying system for Giant Slab, which is a qualifying system for World's Strongest Man, any of those guys could also move a 300 kilogram deadlift like this. We're going to talk about strength curves towards the end of the video, so stick around for that. But this is impressive for sure, but it does not tell me that he's going to be one of the strongest men in the world.
Okay, so yeah, of course it's not going to tell you that he's going to be the strongest man in the world because it's a submaximal lift he moves really fast. And other strongmen can do that. That doesn't really prove much because it's submaximal. He's not going as hard as he can. Again, I want to bring to everyone's point here, like, if Lasha was to just focus on deadlifting for an inordinate amount of time, let's say like a couple training cycles, also having no fear of testing protocols whatsoever, do we really think he wouldn't be incredible at the deadlift? Because if you do, then that's fine. I can agree to disagree with you. I think Mitchell continuously brings up, which we're about to see, is skill and skill curve, and then also force and things of that nature. So like, you know, when we look at strength, we're talking about force. And when we're looking at weightlifting, we're talking about applying that force fast, which is more about power, okay? If we think that the guy who is skilled enough to manipulate a barbell that has never been manipulated in that way with that amount of weight, if we think that he cannot possibly deadlift very serious weights, then that's a huge point that we can disagree with. The biggest part about this video is this hypothetical, okay? If Lasha was to say, I want to be a strongman competitor, and he put his head down and he worked, okay? I think he would have to be a little bit younger, and he would have to be almost a little bit more unsuccessful in weightlifting, right? Because now he's kind of just like Thanos, just looking off, right? That's the type of guy who probably isn't going to do that great in strongman. But let's just say that Lasha had a little chip on his shoulder, and he was like, I'm going to train for strongman. Do we really think that he could not be an incredible deadlifter? Because then we're just going to have to agree to disagree. If that's the scenario we're working with, that's the assumption that I'm going to take from here on out. Lasha wants to be an incredible strongman. That is the assumption. And he's going to put his crazy training brain, something that I don't think many people on earth can understand. Somebody who trained a very specific thing since they were a child and did it every day for decades to become the greatest at that thing. If that person took that level of determination, also being 6'6" with a massive wingspan, couldn't deadlift very well, then we're going to have to agree to disagree. Let's carry on with this video.
I'm going to double down on this, but when we look at Lasha's 267 clean and jerk, when you look at the clean pull, look really closely at how much the bar actually moves from his hips to when he gets under the bar.
I don't like this
argument. It's not so much that he can pull the bar up really high. It's that he is incredibly efficient at getting under the bar. So at 267 kilos, he might only move the bar an extra 3 or 4 inches maximum above that hip joint to be able to drop back under. Again, this is something that many people in the world can do in terms of the first half. In terms of getting under it and squatting it back up, that is a whole different animal.
Okay, so notice how Mitchell's going to continually use efficiency and skill and power. Okay, Lasha wins at all three of those. So keep that in mind, because there's certain aspects when he's arguing why Lasha couldn't do well because he doesn't have the skill necessary, which means he doesn't have the efficiency necessary. The power thing, Mitchell pretty much across the board is like, yeah, this guy's the most powerful guy ever. So that's fine. But just, it's important to note that. And again, we're looking at a sub-maximal pull, right? So like he's saying, other guys can pull 267 with that intensity. Maybe, Maybe not. I don't know. I think there's a lot more to the second pull than simply just being like, oh, it's 3 inches. Now I can drop under it. I think there's a lot of musculature and there's a lot of strength that isn't being talked about, but that's more of the nitty gritty type stuff. Okay. So take note of the efficiency and skill thing going forward. Here we go.
On the top half of the lift, when it comes to the jerk, there's so much whip in an Olympic bar that you can take advantage of with super heavy weight, that bar sinks and rises. And again, his skill is mostly in being able to get under the bar and lock his arms out very, very stiff and push the bar in a perfect line rather than how high he can actually get the bar. I'm training this event right now in terms of max jerk for the Arnolds, and I can get 267 kilos higher than Lasha, but I am nowhere near the movement ability and the skill to be able to push that up in the right spot and to be able to lock my arms well. That's my limiting factor, not how strong I am.
Look.
Okay. Again, it's just so simplified in a way that I think it's misconstrued. I think it's misunderstood almost entirely. This is a very serious point I'm about to make here, and this is going to be a very controversial one as well. If you took the 100 greatest strongmen of all time, and you took them from when they were kids, when they were adolescents, and you trained them in Olympic weightlifting only for decades, none of them would lift more than Lasha Talakhadze does in the clean and jerk. Okay? That's what I believe. And the reason I can say that somewhat confidently is because it's already kind of happened. There have been so many weightlifters to have gone through the sport of Olympic weightlifting, and none of them have lifted what Lasha has consistently over the years, competition after competition, training session after training session. None of them have done that. So when Mitchell says, yeah, I mean, I can get the bar higher than Lasha. I can do this. Every strongman can do these things. It's just a skill thing. It's just a skill thing. Do we think that the skill or effort or ability could not transfer over to strongman if Lasha wanted to? Because again, this is what this argument comes down to. This is no slouch. This is not just some guy who's pretty strong. This is the greatest to ever do it ever. And again, going one direction to strongman, I don't think anyone would ever touch Lasha, even if they had the same amount of training as Lasha. Same system, same everything. I still don't think they would. Again, because of what I said prior. Now, going this way, where Lasha goes to strongman, I think fundamentally it's basically the opposite. Let's carry on.
The last video here is Lasha bench pressing, and he bench pressed 180 kilos for 3 reps. And this was pretty close to a max effort. For context, I would be able to bench press 200 kilos for 3 reps. That would
hold on. Was that actually a 180 bench press? I don't know what it was. Okay.
But I'm a terrible bench presser in the world of strongman. My static strength is not that good. If we look at someone like Eddie Hall, he can rep out 225 kilos, or at least he could back in the day, for multiple reps. This is way in excess of what Lasha could do. And so, well, why is it?
All right. So here we go. So let's talk about the bench press. This is such a silly goddamn movement. The greatest way to increase your bench press, and you can increase it very fast, is to up frequency, period. Up frequency, take a lot of drugs. Men have so many androgen receptors up in their shoulders, in their chest, and all you have to do is up your frequency because it's not a very high-skilled movement. Again, we're talking about a guy who's the most skillful with a barbell on earth. So up frequency, let's say he benches 3 times a week, takes as much drugs as humanly possible, and has total free reign and completely stress-free. And again, takes his abilities that he had, his brain that he has to train, and puts it into the bench press. This is a non-starter of an argument.
Squats are a really good example. And this is the last lift I have here from Lasha, with a 335 kilo squat double. And he is doing this in knee wraps. I believe these are Olympic wraps, so they're not that tight. They don't provide that much support. But a 335 kilo squat for 2 in a movement that he is very competent in is very, very strong in terms of a lay person. But in terms of the strongest people in the world, There are people who squat 1,000 pounds with knee sleeves on without wraps at all. That's 120 kilos.
Okay, just to clarify things, those wraps are not what people in the strength world understand as wraps. Those are basically cloth that they wrap around their knees. Like, we don't like these aren't like wraps like the powerlifting world has wraps. So the wraps versus sleeves thing, right? 335, not that heavy, totally. Again, submaximal for Lasha. Again, if this dude trained the squat, I mean, trained the squat, took his brain that he has, and had unlimited gear use with absolutely no stress of testing. Now, this is not to say that Lasha doesn't absolutely slam gear, but it's in a very, very different way than a strongman. I can guarantee you that. Okay. So 335 for a very sub-maximal set of 2. Yes, doesn't prove anything, but it also doesn't prove that he can't do more, and he couldn't do a lot more. Okay. The point, something is very important to understand about Olympic weightlifting. If you are weak, you might not be able to lift a certain thing. But if you are strong, the idea is like to just be strong enough to make sure that you can train freely. And this is something that I realized when I was working with Talakhadze. He said the most he ever back squatted in preparation for a 240 kilo clean and jerk, the most he back squatted was 260. That is outrageous. And he could have back squatted way more than that, but he never did because it never would have benefited him. This is really important to understand. And I don't think, like, yes, a surplus of strength is important in weightlifting, but it happens a lot more with people who start late. They have a lack of strength and they need to make up for it. But a surplus of strength, basically you want to narrow that gap so that you can be the most productive you can be in the sport of Olympic weightlifting without wasting a lot of your systemic fatigue on these strength lifts. I think Lasha, if trained, could do that for 10 reps, dude. Like, there's no doubt about it. Okay. Let's go on.
First, we have the.
So now he's talking about strongman.
Olympic lifters have incredibly strong grips. So I believe that he could do reasonably well in grip related events.
I agree.
When it came to overhead events, he would do well if we used a barbell. In terms of an axle or a log, this would mean that he has to have this whole new skill acquisition, because jerking a log is.
Well, I'm going to have to talk about the point that you kept bringing up: skill, efficiency, power. These are things that Lasha has in bounds. And if we think that Lasha couldn't absolutely destroy a log, then this conversation's over with. Have you guys ever heard of Mikhail Koklaev?
Hello, everybody.
Have you ever seen him do the log? Okay. Now, somebody who wipes the floor with Koklaev's numbers in weightlifting. I think Koklaev's best snatch was like 190, if that. His best clean and jerk was 230 to 240, which is massive. Both of those are massive. Lasha would do like sets of 5 with those. Okay. No, sets of 5 in clean and jerk is not possible. I'm being hyperbolic now. Seriously, I think that the last thing Lasha would worry about is a log. I'm sorry. That's just one of the events based off of Mikhail Koklaev that I just think Lasha would smash in. Okay. Onward.
It's not that easy, especially when it's really heavy and it's bulky and it's out in front of you. It's not the same thing. Your whole body is in a different position.
We know it's not the same thing. I just think Lasha could pick it up with ease.
Now, when it comes to something like a yoke and moving extremely heavy weight on his back, this is where Lasha would get exposed, or any weightlifter would get exposed. When you start working with these weights that they're nowhere close to touching, and you have to move it slow and steady, because eventually it's just going to feel like it's crushing you, they're not prepared for that. Their bodies...
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. Of course he's not prepared for it. We are now having 2 different arguments. The only way we can have this argument whatsoever is if we say, give Lasha time to do what he did in weightlifting. Again, taking that mindset in weightlifting and taking it over to strongman. We are talking about the kid who put in thousands of hours towards training to become the greatest of all time in a sport. We are taking that guy who is 6'6", who's built perfectly for the sport of strongman in a sport that is highly based off of strength, whether you like to believe it or not. If we take that guy and we say, go train strongman, Mikhail Koklaev could compete in strongman. He did it pretty easily, actually. I don't think he was ever like the best ever. And maybe in today's world, he wouldn't have done that great. I don't know the answer to that. But I think we need to understand that this is not, hey, Lasha, the strength and level you're at right now, go do a strongman event. No, of course he wouldn't win. Of course he wouldn't do well.
When it comes to a deadlift, any sort of deadlift, they would be dead in the water.
No.
Last place at the Arnold Strongman Classic will be about 400 kilos, and this would be what I would anticipate to be the top-end strength of the elite open weight men Olympic lifters.
Okay, I think Lasha would be so good at the deadlift. He was built to deadlift, bro. He was built to deadlift. Like that, like if it was overhead pressing, I think that would be the hardest thing for Lasha to gain. But yes, let's go on.
When it comes to Atlas stones, again, I think they would be fine off of the ground. I believe that they could deadlift a 200 kilo stone into their lap. But when it comes to the raw strength and power to front squat a 200 plus kilo stone, I'm not sure that would be something that would be very easy for them. So that's a bit of a 50.
I think Mitchell misspoke here talking about the front squat as if this isn't the front squat, brother. That's the Olympic weightlifter's game right there. Okay. But I think, again, we're talking Lasha with orangutan arms, bro. The Atlas stone would be money for this guy. Would be so money. And again, it's like, okay, a skill level, like, yeah, he would take time to practice these things and work on these things, but the skill is not impossible for him to pick up. I don't see that skill being tough for him. So it's just training it, and I think he could train it very, very well.
Ultimately, the name of the game in strongman is to be as consistent as possible to gain good points in every event. That's how you win shows, and that's how you do well. And what I think would happen with a lot of Olympic lifters is that...
Okay, so look, this is no shade to Mitchell. I speak with Mitchell, relatively frequently. I've done videos with him, but I just feel, again, we can be having two separate arguments, two different lines of argumentation here can be going on at the same time. You take Lasha, you drop him into a strongman competition right now. Like, yeah, it's probably not going to go well for him. He actually might do pretty well in some events, maybe. Okay. But you put the guy who had been training his whole life, and it's a different world when you take kids and just pound them into the ground with hard training to refine them into the greatest on earth in a sport that has been refined over a century. Okay, there's a distinct difference between that and everything else. And I just think that that's a very underrated aspect of the kind of person that Lasha is, which is a very important factor to this whole thing. I'd love to see what you guys think in the comment section. You can also check out the video that I made about this like years ago. I think it's like why I think Lasha is the strongest man on earth or whatever. But yes, I will see you guys in the next video.